all eyes are on New Hampshire. Will it be another clean sweep for former President Donald Trump, who's currently campaigning there?
Well, it looks that way. I mean, one of the interesting things I think is that the polling seems to be correct this time around. 2016, we couldn't trust any of it. And in Iowa, the Des Moines Register had Trump on 52%, and that's what he got. And so we're getting similar polling in New Hampshire, which says he's about 16 to 20 points ahead of his rival, Nikki Haley, and of course, Governor DeSantis. So he'll probably sweep that too. I mean, the interesting thing here is, I think, if you pointed out in your package, is what happens to Chris Christie's votes. I mean, who are they going to go for? Though I must say, today in the age of endorsement, it's a little less effective than when I was a kid, when Mayor Daley in Chicago endorsed you. You got a lot of votes. But I don't know if Chris Christie, and I don't know if your viewers know this, Ortenzia, but the reason that Governor Christie fell out with the Trump administration is he had sent Jared Kushner's father to jail when he was a federal prosecutor. So there was very bad blood there. So in a sense, it's a family feud.
Yes, now we're not hearing much from the Democrats, Joe, are we? They're keeping pretty quiet. When can we expect to hear some announcements from their camp?
Well, oddly enough, President Biden, because he's so faithful to his South Carolina contingent, has decided to make South Carolina the first Democratic primary. He's not on the primary, though there are some people who will probably write him in. It's really a very strange thing because in New Hampshire, even independents can vote in the primary. So ain't going to be any Democrats running this time. I mean, the president, we're not going to get a full measure of what he can do this time around. So it's pretty silent. And of course, I think there's a lot of scheming going on in the background. I mean, I keep hearing echoes about, maybe Michelle Obama's going to go for it. And I know that President Obama is very unhappy with what's going on. Maybe Governor Newsom will go for it. But a lot of Democrats mistrust President Biden going down the stretch. I mean, he may win the primary, but he may get rolled very easily between after the primaries are in and before the nominating convention in Chicago in July.
Now, you and I have spoken a few times, and you've mentioned that this election is actually turning out to be a fair election. Can you give us a little background on why things are looking like they may be different this time around?
Well, I think there are less people inventing stories about things. I think the last time the Democratic and the Republican pollsters, they just told the story that, the boss wanted to hear. As Mark Twain said, tell me who's paying your bills and I'll tell you exactly what you're going to say. And so a lot of times I think they fudge the results. This time we're tending to get more the truer type polling, real polling. Last time they blamed it on the people who refused to tell the pollsters the truth. That's not true at all. I think the pollsters skewed the evidence, so we didn't know. But I think we're getting a pretty good view here, and starting to look very good for President Trump. I know that it's following the events in Davos yesterday, where all the good and great gather once a year to figure out the world, and they're all the smart money, Ortenzia, is on Donald Trump. They think he's a winner, and that they're going to have to learn how to deal with him. And indeed, they will deal with him, because no one on Wall Street ever lost any money dealing with Donald Trump's administration.
Now, Joe, can you talk to us about this deal in Congress that ties up Biden's Ukraine policy with border reform?
Well, yeah, Biden rolled the dice. He gave Zelensky what he wanted. He was going to chance foreign policy accomplishments, but the Ukrainians aren't doing very well. They got worn out by the Russians, and the president doesn't want to be seen to be leaving Ukrainians in the lurch, which of course was exactly what's happening. Now, the president's detractors in Congress, they decided that if he wants to give money to the Ukrainians, if he wants to continue to give money to them, he's going to have to settle on some kind of border reform. It's extraordinary. 10,000 people a day are coming across America's borders. These are immigrants and asylum seekers. These are people from Afghanistan. These are people from everywhere, as a matter of fact. So America's hemorrhaging at the borders. So they're saying, what's the point of giving President Zelensky money to keep intruders off his borders when America's being invaded every day by 10,000 strangers? So they want to tie it that way. And they may even tie it to further funding for the Israeli policy, which is going down the tubes anyway.
Back home now, and Penny Wong this week announced another $21.5 million in funding to Gaza. But there's well-documented concern about exactly where this money could actually end up, alleged siphoning following reports of UNRWA aid ending up in Hamas's hands. Now, the Shadow Home Affairs Minister, James Paterson, he says that Penny Wong effectively conceded this because she can't confirm where Australia's taxpayer-funded money will end up.
Yeah, Penny Wong's in a tight spot there. If you want to give money, you can give money, but you have no idea where it's going. You know, look at the billions of dollars that Obama and Biden turned over to Iran to try to move them along. And you know where all that money is. That money has been given to Hamas and Hezbollah and all their enemies, or all their allies in the Middle East, who are enemies of Israel and the United States. There is no doubt in my mind that most of the money going to Gaza in the past 5 years, and a lot of that came from Qatar, going to Hamas, was siphoned off. It wasn't used for the people. And the Palestinians, of course, have the Palestinian authorities have their own reputation for embezzlement. So it's not a safe investment. You know, when you give money to the middle, that part of the world, you just kind of have to hold your breath and maybe hold your nose at the same time.
So what should we do, Joe? Should we just stop the funding altogether?
Well, that seems too hard. You know, it's nice to give the money and hope it goes to the right people, and particularly if it goes through the United Nations. The trouble is the United Nations is seen to be very one-sided in its views on the Palestinians. That is, it takes a positive view and a lesser view of the Israelis. So, you know, people think the money's not going to the right place. But how are you going to get money there? I mean, what can you possibly do about it? And at the end of the day, you got to do something. I mean, you cannot be seen to be indifferent to the suffering and pain of those people. And all of them, as a matter of fact. So when you give money to international organizations, you just kind of hold your breath. And let me tell you, that's been a problem about international organizations my entire life, is where does the money wind up? I mean, that's the $64,000 question.
So where to from here with this war between Hamas and Israel?
Well, I tell you what, we're in a tight spot. President Netanyahu made it very clear in his statement the other day, the day before yesterday, that he sees no place for a Palestinian state in these borders. He thinks that they are not fit to have their own separate states, not qualified. And as far as he's concerned, he's been consistent since 1978. He regards the Palestinian state as Jordan, which has 50 to 60% of its people are Palestinians. Those are the ones who fled in the late 1940s. He doesn't want to give another state. And of course, Netanyahu has been very successful in Israeli politics on the right, of course, by arguing that there really is no legitimacy to a Palestinian state, which is why he's given a free hand to the settlers to do what they want to do. And as far as he's concerned, yeah, he would turn Gaza into a parking lot. Now, the problem is the Americans want him to have a viable two-state solution, something to offer the millions of young Palestinians some kind of hope. And Netanyahu doesn't want to do this. Most of the public, of course, is just terrified that something's going to happen next. So the Palestinians are going to get shortchanged on this. And Netanyahu and the Americans may be going their separate ways, because Joe Biden only has one way of rescuing his Israeli policy, and that is to insist on a two-state solution. The problem is no one's listening.
Joe Siracusa, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your expert analysis.
Thank you.